Welcome to the Oscoda Township Regular Board Meeting, January 14th, 2019. Let's start with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, roll call.
Mr. Cummings.
Here.
Ms. McGuire.
Here.
Mr. Gajewski.
Here.
Mr. Palmer.
Here.
Mr. Nordine here. Mr. Byer.
Here.
Mr. Weed.
Here. Do we have any agenda additions?
Yes. I wanted to add an item for the RAB IR, or the Air Force IR update, which I provided a handout for everyone on the board and a couple for the audience. I think I would go into project updates.
All right, any other additions?
Did you, we were gonna add a bike path?
For project updates.
Yeah.
If there was anything for the agenda itself?
No.
All right, is there a motion to set the agenda?
So moved. Support.
Motion by Mr. Palmer, support by Mr. Gajewski. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? All right, the agenda's set. Next is public comment. There's a 4-minute time limit. For this first one, it's to fill out a card and submit it to the superintendent. And when you come to the podium, please introduce yourself. Are there any cards?
We do. We have Greg Cole about the Now Group.
Greg Cole, 4507 Van Etten Dam Road. The Now Group's real quick is going to be meeting this Thursday at 5:30, 7 p.m. here at the library. And that's all I got. Just wanted to let you know.
Excellent.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other cards?
Nope.
All right, for the consent agenda, any comments regarding work session meeting minutes for December 7th and the second work session on December 7th and the regular meeting minutes of December 10th? Anything regarding the payment of bills for $411,137.84? Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
Is there support?
Support.
Motion by Mr. Byer, support by Mr. Palmer. Roll call?
Mr. Byer.
Yes.
Mr. Cummings.
Yes.
Mr. Nordine, yes. Mr. Palmer.
Yes.
Mr. Gajewski.
Yes.
Ms. McGuire.
Yes.
Mr. Weed.
Yes, motion passed. Next, subcommittee reports and project updates. First one is sewer rate work session from the 9th.
All right. Well, I just wanted to thank the board. I know I ate up a lot of extra time. Last week we had multiple work sessions during the same week, and I appreciate you coming out. As provided, the Mr. Tom Traciak came up and provided several different scenarios as far as the completion of the SAW grant, the prioritization of the capital improvements needed for the sewer system, the sanitary sewer system, and he was able to provide several different scenarios as far as being able to raise rates immediately, a stair-step approach or a more managed approach. And based on feedback from the Township Board, he is going to be able to revise some of those projections as far as the impact to the rates. Besides the impact of the rates, he also went through, there was projected debt issuance over the next 20 years of approximately $11 million, as well as what the cash balance at the end of 20 years, what the cash balance of the sanitary sewer fund 590 would also look like. So with that and input from the board, he will be revising that, and when that is submitted, I will be dispersing that for the Township Board's review.
All right. And the strategic work session we had on Friday?
All right, so we had, again, well attended for the strategic work session last Friday. Mr. Joe Borgstrom was able to provide a recap of the December 7th work session. He again incorporated some of the SWOT analysis. We went over a vision statement, we went over a mission statement, and we went through quite a lengthy process as far as putting up there for some high-level goals associated for the township. And he is going to be submitting a final report by the end of the month. And when that is completed, we will be, I will be sending that out to the Township Board, as well as trying to decipher, that's not the end of it. We will be having some more goal-setting sessions based on those high-level goals. So that's when we're going to need to determine objectives for those different goals and assign who is going to do what by when. So once we agree on some high-level goals, then we have to go through and make sure that all the objectives are going to be able to complete those goals, and that the township will complete its vision by 2028.
All right, next, bike path design.
Yeah, we haven't talked about the bike path for a bit. Just a reminder, Phase 1, which is the section that starts at Mill Street, goes through Oscoda out to the high school. They're planning to begin construction on that this spring. Phase 3, which we've worked on, goes from the high school out through Old Orchard Park. And just, we've discussed it, it was passed several months ago. The three townships of Oscoda, Osable, and Plainfield applied for grants for preliminary engineering studies for the potential bike path. Oscoda received $30,000, Plainfield received $30,000, Osable received $20,000. And it was determined by the IET to combine those resources for $80,000 to have one engineering firm to do the remainder of the bike path in those three townships. And that has been completed. I'll just take them starting coming into Oscoda. What they're labeling as Phase 7. There's some confusion in this about the numbering, because originally the odd numbers were the east and west part of the path, the even numbers were north and south. But anyway, they've got this phase as Phase 7, which is from the Baldwin Township line to Mill Street. That is 6.2 miles. They've calculated an approximate price for that construction at $2.5 million. There's a number of, they looked at running that up both sides of US 23, and on the west side of US 23 are all the utility lines, water lines, electric lines, telephone cables, internet cables, and also Osable preferred to have the path on the east side of the road, closer to the lake. That creates a number of problems, because there are actually buildings and garages that are built in the road right-of-way. How that happened, nobody knows, but so they will have to engineer that path as much as they can around these obstacles. There are some signs and berms that some of the resorts have that will actually have to be removed in order to get the path and keep it a sufficient distance from the road. So that's the section that will bring the bike path from Baldwin Township into Osable. And then, of course, section from Oscoda out to the school and then out to Old Orchard Park. And then the next section goes from Old Orchard Park, that is phase, well, what they've labeled as phase 4. It actually should be, I believe, 5, but the numberings really don't matter. But that goes from the west end of Old Orchard Park to Iargo Springs. That's 17.4 miles with an estimated price of $3.4 million. And a good portion of that part of the path will be compressed gravel as opposed to all asphalt, to try and save some money, because as you can see, the part from the path from Baldwin to Mill Street is 6.2 miles, and that's $2.5 million. This is 17.4 miles, so nearly 3 times as much. We'd be looking at, almost $9 million to put an all asphalt path through that. So, and there are other areas in the state that have a crushed limestone path that seem to work relatively well. Then the final stage goes from there at Iargo Springs, the rest of the way on the north side of River Road, out just before the intersection of 65. If you look at that, there's it's been cleared with the road, and it kind of V's out this way before you get to the intersection. And about 400 yards back from the intersection is where it'll cross. The path will go across to River Road and then continue on down M65 down to into Plainfield Township, down to Slosser Road. And that section is 7.9 miles with an estimated price of $2,811,000. And so that will complete the bike path in Oscoda, Osable, and Plainfield Townships once those are completed. Now that will be several years out from now. Like I said, phase 1 in Osable is just going to be starting this year. We're hoping that our phase 3 out from there to Old Orchard Park will be in 2020, and hopefully we can get one of these done every year after that if funds are available. As you might know, this was a pet project of our former Governor Snyder. I don't think we've really heard yet what the new governor's thoughts are on this, but there's a good deal of it that's been completed throughout the state, and there's still a lot of work that's going on currently. So hopefully it will find its way to completion. So thank you.
All right, for the Phase 2 water main project, last month, Sue Aller was able to have in the appropriations $580,000 from the state to that project, which fills the gap from the USDA amount. So that means we no longer have to go for that loan.
A note on that, I would like to have all of us at least think about and entertain what we might do if we did still pursue the loan. Try to further go another step further in a different project if that's possible. Just because we had already, committed to it in our minds, or at least in my mind, and the more of this we can get done, the better. And take our windfall and push our efforts a little further.
Aaron, before we get into superintendent reports, I think it was Friday 11th meeting, Osable was going to attend regarding their concern about water rates or sewer rates. Did that happen? Any progress? All settled?
No, it's not all settled. We're at the point where we need to do a cost analysis specific for Osable, which means it's not part of the SAW process, so we have to enter into another contract to have whichever company we hire to do that assessment and determine what those costs mathematically should be.
Okay. Did that seem to satisfy them? Or are they still upset?
I don't know if they're still upset, but I think they're glad that we're making progress on it.
Okay, all right, thank you.
It's my take that they accepted the question, that none of us had an answer as to how the rates have been calculated these past years. So they accepted that we didn't know and they didn't know, and
Okay.
we should look.
All right, another item for the cybersecurity insurance.
Yes, at the last couple of meetings, we discussed the cybersecurity insurance, and one of the topics that came up out of that discussion was making sure we're as eligible as we can be to make a claim. So we've got processes and best practices in place. And I went back to our insurance agent and asked what he could do to give us some feedback or pointers as to how we would be put in a position so that we could make a claim. And he had some feedback. The policy came with documentation stating that the carrier provided 1 hour of free risk management, so I'll pursue that. And then Paul Olson is looking for other resources and going to be getting back with me. So just so the board knows, I'm pursuing that as to how we can put ourselves in the best position possible to hopefully not need to make a claim, and then if we do, be eligible to make it.
MTA conference?
Yes, a reminder to the board that the MTA conference is in April from the 1st to the 4th at the DeVos Place in Grand Rapids. I'm making mention of it now because the housing opportunity for the process begins tomorrow, and that's usually a relatively competitive thing there. So I just want anyone who's planning to go to be aware. That goes township wide, staff, other boards. So that opens tomorrow.
You have to be registered for the conference before you can apply for the housing.
Yeah, and it's not something from my experience that's going to go in a day, but it does. I've every year I've been doing it, I've had people come in and say, "Oh, I'm being too late to get at one of the prime hotels." They have different hotels in proximity to the conference. Everyone usually has a place to stay, but they're shuttling or walking away, and so just if you want to get a decent room.
What process do you want to follow if we have to register first and then look for housing?
It's usually a bit of a convoluted process. You need to register, and then you get a housing code, and then the individual going, uses that housing code to essentially I pay for the code. You can do with the code what you want. Pick the hotel. So get with me if you want to register, and I'll register you and get you. Then in turn you would get the code. So.
Got it. Thanks.
Mm-hmm.
Office 365 licenses?
Yes, finally for me, there's been some discussion over the last few months, it's been a while now, about when we made the switch to Microsoft 365 and the Exchange server, what did we get Microsoft Office Suite, the programs for board members? And I looked at the board meeting, the minutes and the quote there, and we got 5 seats, 5 licenses of Office 365, the suite, so Excel, Word, PowerPoint, all that. And the intent was that it would include applications for board member computers and 1 staff member. So I haven't gone as far as figuring out what's left of those 5, but we did get 5, and I'm quite confident in saying there will be some available. If I know board members had been interested in that functionality to be able to have the Office programs on these laptops for various things. We did get that. We paid for those licenses. I think some of them have probably been taken, and I can get an exact number. And I should note that each license comes with the ability to put those programs on 5 computers. So for my instance, I could use the desktop in my office as one, this as another, and there would still be 4 other licenses available for other board members. So just wanted to make the point that I looked into it, and the option is there for board members to have those programs.
All right, the RAB information repository.
All right, so a little backdrop on this topic. So as I think everybody on the board will remember, and those in the public audience may not know, but the information repository that was the very first one that was created was located here at this library some years ago, prior to the second RAB that was initiated here about a year and a half ago. Now, that, what's called an IR, was removed from the library and taken back into possession by the Air Force. We've been trying to get it back for as many years as I've been involved in this contamination. And I've been told by a number of people at Bay West in the Air Force that they weren't going to let us have it back, which was problematic because it's a township asset. It's not a government or Air Force property. So upon pushing on this point again, the lady who attends the RABs, her name is Brianne Humphreys. She's a contractor for the Air Force. She was helping me follow this up and see if I could get some progress on this. So on the 19th of December, I got a phone call and an email from her. The email is the part of this couple pages that I've printed here and passed out. Essentially, she sent, when she called and emailed, I called her right back. So there was about an hour of a conversation that she and I had. And during that hour, I took notes which comprised this entire first page of this email. These are notes that I jotted down while she was talking, read back to her. We went back and forth, trying to make sure I understood what she was telling me as she was kind of hopping around, trying to explain to me a whole lot of information about this topic, about where's the IR, and can we come and pick it up. Well, anyway, so I'm just going to summarize from this for the people who don't have a copy, that years ago, 3 copy sets were maintained. One copy was for Paul Rakowski, an official copy that essentially acted as the on-site hard copy before what was called the AR. What does that stand for again? Aaron? AR? What is that again? I forgot.
I don't remember right now either.
Yeah, I know, I just blanked on it. Something repository, Air Force repository, I can't remember. Before that online repository existed, paper copies obviously had to exist. And so that copy for Mr. Rakowski was apparently the official copy that was used. And then there was, oh, I'm sorry, I take that back. There was an official copy for Paul, then there was the official copy, I'm sorry, there were 3 copies. I'm messing this up. One for Paul. One is an official copy that was essentially the on-site copy of the before the AR existed, and then there was a copy for Oscoda Township, which was the IR, the Oscoda Township IR. Okay, well anyway, recently there was confusion acknowledged amongst everybody at the Air Force, at Bay West, a number of people, as we were trying to press this point again and trying to determine what the documents were in the cabinets at the Bay West office here on the old base. The documents in the metal cabinets at Bay West at the, on the base are not, after all, the original IR as everyone was led to believe. The documents were in fact hard copies of what was added to the AR up to 2002. So the AR was a project where they had to go back and they had to create it by scanning documents in. That's because it wasn't originally online. That was how they primed that repository. Well, so then we get into the next point. After the original IR repository was removed from the library, it moved to a few different locations over the years. These IR documents, which comprised one of the 3 copy sets that I mentioned at the beginning, were believed to have already been added to the AR online repository. Now the news. The Oscoda Township IR paper documents were destroyed 2 to 3 years after retrieving the IR from the library. So how the Air Force and any other contractors at the time didn't know this is really kind of beyond belief, because For as many times as I've been asking for this repository and as many emails from the Air Force as I have saying they weren't going to give it to me or us, now to find out that they destroyed it just a couple of years, 2 to 3 years after they took possession of it, and then added to the point that that's actually township property and not theirs, is really kind of astounding to me, to be blunt, and I think is really the concerning point here for me is the lack of transparency, and that repository could have maintained information that was never put into the AR and therefore has been lost. And that is the reason why I believe there's a little bit of a, I could call it a cover-up. That's the statement. Anybody have any questions?
So when they told you, no, you can't have these, you're assuming it's because they knew they had been destroyed but didn't want to admit that?
No, I'm not necessarily saying that, because it seemed to be very clear from Brienne that there was a whole lot of confusion going on anyway, but why would they destroy 2 to 3 years after they picked it up something that they knew they didn't own it? They know that. They know that those repositories are not owned by the Air Force. And when we continue to ask for them, I have emails in my government email, FOIAble if anyone wants them, that we tried to get them and were flat out refused.
Did they ever give you a reason? If my suggested
No.
reason was wrong, did they give you another one? No.
They didn't. They just didn't want to give them to us.
All right, I have one more question. These seem to be of dire importance to us to have. Can you explain that a little bit? Why?
Well, yeah, an IR is a collection of documents maintained local to a community. It doesn't, nobody has a copy of everything in the IR that would be in the AR. The AR is purely, it's the Air Force. It's the, maybe some MDEQ documents. It's the official documents. They might put in some drafts. The IR would contain anything else that we wanted to put into it, really. It would be newspaper articles. It would be any other findings. Could have been any other meetings which could have taken place here locally, discussing information about the contamination that the Air Force didn't deem necessary or to meet the criteria to put into an AR. Remember, it didn't exist at the time. The AR didn't exist back then. That was why there was a paper copy. So where we're getting into a problem here is that someone basically filtered through the documents and decided what was going to be added and what wasn't. That's the concern here. And my belief, I mean, I stand here with, I think, everybody in Oscoda who has any concern about the contamination problem we have. And I think that if anybody would have been around back at the time of the first RAB, there could have easily been conversations that we're not having today with the Air Force, sharing information that we're not sharing today, because right now we're focusing on what we currently know today. But that historical repository could easily have contained information we don't have today. And that is the point.
This can be taken as a joke. You're thinking, and maybe I'm being facetious, but could we not get copies of Mr. Rakowski's?
Well, that's a question. That's a good question. I don't know where these other copies are. That's a good question, I guess. I mean, and to the point, I put this in the board packet now because I want to get this information out to people to let them know what happened since our last board meeting. Brianne Humphreys has sent this topic up the ranks, as you can imagine, in the Air Force. When I put this email together, I think she saw the urgency that I was expressing and the concern that I was expressing by detailing this, and she's trying to put together an official statement, which hasn't come back to me yet. I think there is concern on their side.
Point number 8 here says, at most installations, the IR is a superset of information. If the IR is lost, there would be loss of information. However, in the case of Wordsmith Air Force Base, Paul Rakowski requested everything that was added to the IR was also added to the AR.
That's what we were told, but
Okay.
we don't know that for a
Okay.
fact because we have no originals to compare that to.
Sure. So that's, I see the point.
Yep,
There's no way to truly know that if the originals are gone.
correct,
That's what you're
yeah.
saying.
And also by point, that eighth point on the list violates the policy of the Air Force in the management of the AR, because that isn't what you're supposed to do with an AR. You're supposed to just follow the procedure of what to put in. And the fact that more was put in for us could appear to be a benefit, but we can't prove that anything was edited.
Sure.
Tim, it says in here that something about the date of 2002, where these were added up to 2002. Do we have any idea how old some of those documents might have been, from what time period they would have?
No, unfortunately, I don't remember when the first RAB occurred, and the 2002 represents, as I recall from the conversation, when the AR was created.
There are documents, when base closure of Wordsmith was being planned,
Yeah.
that in those documents from back then stated that the information repository was to be created and those documents were to be stored at the Township Library. So they at least go that far back.
So, back to when the base was closing, okay.
Right.
All right, well, that's quite a time span, should be a lot of documents there.
Yes, it actually contained, in fact, this was the point, we kind of thought there was just a couple or few filing cabinets. It turned out that, I'm trying to remember if I had that in here or not. It seemed that there was quite a number of boxes that were removed when when it was picked up from the library. It was quite a lot. It was not a small number. There was a significant accumulation of paper. That's it.
All right, then on to superintendent report. First one's partial payment to MacArthur Construction for the Phase 1 water main extension.
All right, so the first 4 items on the superintendent report here are all related to the water main extension projects. As we discussed previously, MacArthur Construction has not received any partial payment for the Phase 1 of the water main extension construction. What is contained in the board packet is a letter where MacArthur Construction disputes the amount of work that needs to be done on the project punch list provided by Spicer Engineering on the 20th of November to ensure the project is completed within construction specifications. So, in your board packet, you have a string of emails between MacArthur Construction, Spicer Engineering, and Township Administration. Spicer Construction also provided a redlined version of the recommended $130,621.50 as partial payment number 1 to MacArthur Construction. That provides a withholding of $176,000 for the construction project completion. And that remaining $176,000 that will be withheld will be used to ensure the construction project meets all specifications outlined in the punch list provided in the packet.
Any comments?
Do they have any plans on when that's going to be completed?
At this point, Spicer would need to ensure that either MacArthur is going to complete and commit to doing that work, or Spicer is going to need to get another contractor to do that work. That is the next determining factor as far as how this is going to go.
We don't have no time frame on that.
No.
None.
And the USDA is aware of the situation, considering that they're
They are
their
aware
funds.
they are aware of the situation. I don't know if our representatives are checking their email. I get the patented response back as far as we're on furlough and we will get back to you as soon as we're not on furlough anymore.
Approximately, just a ballpark guess, approximately what number of the curb stops are too shallow?
22.
22% or 22 of them?
Each. So 22 curb stops.
And how many are there total?
I don't remember
34?
now. Yeah, somewhere around 35.
It worked out to like 72% when I
Okay.
did it.
And the problem ranges from a few inches to a foot, or what,
6 inches to more.
to more?
And that's after the already allowable variance of limits that were set in place.
Right.
So there was an ideal depth, then there was the variance, and then there's the amount that they're short.
You anticipate this is going to be a war to settle this, kind of? Because I'm reading the stuff from MacArthur, and they just think we're blameless and we're not going to go back and dig up over half of these. I don't know if any kind of insulation has been talked about. I don't know. But I used to live in the Upper Peninsula, and there was a guy named George, I believe at Holsworth, that used to be down here, and he handled water. I think he worked for Husra. This was a few years ago. And he went to Munising, a town in the Upper Peninsula where I used to live. And I've had some communication with him, not recently, but he talks about Upper Peninsula, the what's the word I'm looking for? The rock bed is close to the surface, and they always or frequently have a problem with going deep enough, being able to go deep enough, because the bedrock is too close to the surface. So in the Upper Peninsula, they use some type of insulation frequently, and it works. According to my information, is that a couple of inches of this insulation will give you a situation where it's like you dropped the curb stop a foot and a half. 2 inches will give you that effect. I don't know if it's true, but is it a compromise factor that's worth looking at? I don't know what it costs either, and I don't know who would pay for it.
Right. To apply the insulation, you would have to dig them up. And if you've already got them dug up, you might as well just lower the line while you're there.
Okay.
Curb stops already have insulation on them, and with that insulation, they still need to be a little lower.
Okay. Well,
The other point is
the
that
Upers say that insulation over the whole thing, again, gives you the effect of an extra foot and a half depth, and it works for them. So, I don't know.
the other point being that, you know, the 66 was the minimum depth required by specifications, and that 66 inches, that was the minimum. That's what it needed to be. And there are obviously numerous that are not. And so we need to be able to get that right.
Right.
So that we don't have future problems and the township isn't accepting liability long-term for shallow curb stops.
So Spicer will have to somehow work this out, because during the project, Spicer had an inspector on site. And
He didn't catch this. He or she did not.
whether they caught it or not, I don't know. But if they weren't catching it, then they weren't doing their job. If they were catching it, in no way did they ever make the contractor do the project properly. Or did they contact the township during that, letting them know there were problems with this and maybe it should be stopped. So tonight's decision will then determine how Spicer proceeds from this point to get it fixed.
Sounds like a mess, eh?
Yeah, and it's sad that it had to affect people who were ready to get water
Yeah.
now.
Sure.
So all I ever asked for from the contractor was minimum specifications. And
You didn't get them.
it didn't happen. Any other comments? Is there a motion?
Well, does the board think that the construction company at least deserves the $130,000 as a first payment?
Most of the main line was installed properly, so they should be paid for that. There is a small section of main that is too shallow. And that's
Really?
down at the end of Van Etten Dam Road.
Oh.
But this would be the first money that MacArthur's received. It was their option to just get full payment at the end of the project, correct?
Correct.
So they haven't received any money so far. So this would be the first money they'd be receiving. I'll make a motion to approve the partial payment number 1 in the amount of $130,621.50 to MacArthur Construction.
Support.
Motion by Mr. Palmer, support by Mr. Byer. Roll call.
Mr. Gasky,
Yes.
Ms. McGuire,
Yes.
Mr. Byer,
Yes.
Mr. Nordine, yes. Mr. Palmer,
Yes.
Mr. Cummings,
Yes.
Mr. Weed.
Yes, motion's passed. Next, water service connection information sheet.
All right. So what we want to be able to do is communicate with the residents as far as the water service installation at the private residencies and the commercial property. And so we have Mr. Rick Freeman from Rowe Engineering in attendance tonight to answer any questions related to this process. So what you have is the draft version from Rowe Engineering, and we discussed this at length at the work session last Friday, and I've incorporated some of the suggested changes into the revised letter that was provided hard copy for the board tonight. This draft version of the water service connection information sheet is being presented to the township board for approval. And I want to be able to keep the township board apprised of formal communication to the residents. And this communication to the residents on future phases of the water main extension will be based on the language approved here by the township board. So I envision a very similar process once we have phase 1 going to apply to phase 2 in 2019 here.
Any comments?
I got a couple, actually. On the letter, it says township offices. It doesn't specify an office particular. Do we want to do that, or?
Where do you have, okay, at the bottom of the first page there?
Yeah, and it's on the second side, too, when you're, in the last paragraph as well. And return to the township offices. I mean, is there somebody particular? I see it has your office number that's listed. Do you want them, should it say the water department, or should it say one collective area? Or you don't care who gets them? Or are we gonna have, we're just gonna, in each office, just,
Right now, the plan, based on discussions with the Roe and John, is to be able to have that easement where they come into the clerk's office, so that easement can be signed and notarized and filed with the clerk. And so I do see the point there by the clerk's office.
yeah, maybe it should be returned to the clerk's office in that last section, maybe? And also, the very last sentence, and it goes on to the second page, it talks about they'll be starting to receive regular water usage bills. Shouldn't that include ready to serve also, because it's not just your water that you're using?
I can just delete usage,
Yeah.
the water bills.
And I know that we talked at the pre-board meeting on Friday, and we discussed having some type of a sentence in there regarding if they didn't turn this in, that was an automatic denial.
And that's in the bold.
Oh, I must have missed that, okay. Oh, non-response, okay. All right, thank you.
Anything else?
Is this gonna be plastic or copper?
The lines being installed themselves? I'm not sure.
Plastic. CST material. This is what was spec'd by, it's your.
Plastic?
It's plastic, so it was
Okay.
what we got from the spec from F&B operations, Doug Mowen. That's what they've been putting in now. It's a lot cheaper and it's more durable.
All right, is there a motion?
I'll make a motion that we approve the notification to the residents with the changes that we talked about tonight.
Support.
Motion by Ms. McGuire, support by Mr. Byer. Roll call?
Mr. Palmer,
Yes.
Mr. Byer,
Yes.
Ms. McGuire,
Yes.
Mr. Cummings,
Yes.
Mr. Gasky,
Yes.
Mr. Nordine, yes, Mr. Weed.
Yes, motion's passed. Next, draft easement agreement template for the water service installation.
All right, so the draft easement agreement template for the water service installation is referenced within the language of the water service connection information sheet. Residents would be required to file the proposed easement agreement by physically reporting to the clerk's office within Township Hall prior to the water service installation being completed. And the draft version of this easement agreement is being presented to the board for approval.
Comments? Is there a motion?
I'll move to approve the easement agreement as presented.
Support.
Motion by Mr. Palmer, support by Mr. Cummings. Roll call?
Mr. Nordine, yes. Mr. Palmer,
Yes.
Ms. McGuire,
Yes.
Mr. Byer,
Yes.
Mr. Cummings,
Yes.
Mr. Gasky,
Yes.
Mr. Weed.
Yes, motion's passed. And advertisement for bids for the water service installation.
All right, it is being proposed to the Township Board to formally advertise for bids from contractors to provide the water service connections associated with Phase 1 of the water main extension. This will allow the Township to maximize purchasing power for the residents hooking up to the municipal water system. Your packet contains an advertisement for bids associated with water service connections on Forest Drive and Van Etten Dam Road. The proposed process would also allow the Township to pay the successfully awarded contractor upon the completion of water service connections. The proposed process would not require an individual resident to pay the contractor for the water service connection and then be reimbursed by the Township. So under the proposed scenario, contractors will be submitting sealed bids to the clerk's office over the next 4 weeks, and the advertisement for bids is being presented to the Township Board for approval. You'll see that the timeline in there is for those sealed bids to come in. February 8th is a Friday at 3 p.m., and then the Township would award the contract at regularly scheduled Township Board meeting hopefully on the 25th, and the notice to proceed for the contractor would then be March 4th. And so that when the weather cooperates, we have it all in line to be able to go on these connections.
Comments?
What is stopping MacArthur from bidding on this?
Nothing.
It's only a bid.
Are you satisfied that this is enough time for them to prepare bid materials? It's less than a month.
I believe it is, and I believe we will get both excavating companies and plumbing contractors to be able to respond to this. These are pretty straightforward connections that were spec'd out, and you know, what we really try to do is get them to give us that base bid, and once we understand that base bid, then if there's additional piping or if there's additional boring that would need, we try for that price per linear square foot to really get a good understanding of what that's going to be. But the base bid is really the what we're going to be trying to get out of the contractors. I believe a month would be a sufficient time.
Less than a month. This is the 14th, right?
Correct.
I can just envision different potential bidders saying, we're interested, but we're preparing bids for bigger stuff in the summer in August or July, and we just didn't have enough time to do this. I hope I'm wrong. Because I don't see exactly why the, for lack of a better word, rush on this. I mean, I understand, you know, things will be ready in March. They can't do anything in March, can they? Isn't the ground still full of frost? Give them another week.
Well, even if we wanted to be ready for March, we're saying that the bids will be received and opened on February 8th with the intent to award the contract on the 25th. I don't want to put you, Mr. Schaefer, up against it, but there seems to be time in there. Tabulating the bids, I don't know what you have envisioned for that process, but there should be time. We could compress that a bit, I would think. We could still keep the awarding on February 25th meeting, I would think.
Okay.
So you would envision the 15th, the following Friday.
Potentially, yeah. If I think, yeah, that still gives us about a week to tabulate the bids and whatever else we would need to do, which I don't foresee too much. I'd buy them an extra week if that's what we think.
Is there going to be engineering oversight on each of these installations? Is that factored into the cost?
Did you want to come up to the podium and address this?
Good evening. To answer that question, yes, the combination will be assisting the township as far as evaluating the bids, making sure the contractor's got all of his paperwork in place and all of that. That's why along with the bid, on the checklist, we're asking for, obviously, his contractor's license, his insurance certificates, a 5% bid bond, references, 5 minimum, and then who he's planning on having as his proposed project manager, which will help you a little bit with any contractors that might choose to bid on it that are less than desirable as far as that goes. So, so along with that, but then on top of it also, before the township would pay the contractor for a completed water service, F&V operations will also sign off on the project, the individual hookups, to make sure everything has been done properly. at the right elevation and all the disconnect of the existing well system and all that stuff's been properly done. The other thing is obviously based on what, your previous discussion tonight, none of this work can really start until those curb stop boxes are at their appropriate elevation. So there's going to be a lag as far as the startup of the work in the spring. We wanted to give a time frame though to let them get started as soon as possible because again we need to, according to the grant dollar language, we need to expend these funds by December 31st, 2019. So with 24 services that are in this packet, and then obviously we'll have them included in phase 2 as part of the bid. So we won't have to go through a separate process as far as getting a separate contractor for that. That'll all be included in that bid. So, but to answer a little bit other questions, as we had Mr. Schaefer and Mr. Nordine and I talked last week, this file will be at the clerk's office. Each of the individual property owners has a folder in it. In that folder will be the information sheet, another information sheet, in addition to the one that they get mailed to them, certified mail. There'll be the easement form will be in there. Also, the bid form will be in there. And then that bid form will be changed out when the contractor puts their numbers to that particular residence, and an invoice is in there, then that the township would pay off from that invoice once everything was approved. So.
Okay.
To put you on the spot, my concern about not enough time to prepare bids and submit them. Am I being an old grandpa about that?
No, it's a legitimate concern, but talking to Doug Mowen at F&V, this is a standard package for water service connections that are installed all over the township at other locations. So the suppliers of the material, the materials are sitting there essentially in a package all ready to go. So if it's a general contractor excavator that hooks up with a plumber, they can basically go to the warehouse, get a price for it. So there's not a lot of time needed to put, to find different suppliers and all of that type of stuff. So all of that stuff is pretty well packaged and ready to go. The one thing, like I said, that'll be kind of specific to each resident will be obviously the length of the service and all that stuff. But that 3/4 inch plastic pipe you can buy it in 500 foot, 1,000-foot rolls. So.
Okay. Thank you, Rick.
I got Mr. Freeman up there. I got a couple of questions referring back to the water service connection.
Yes.
On bullet 6, it says properly cap existing well. Do we know at this time that them wells got to be completely out of operation or just capped? Because if you take a well out of operation, that's quite a little more money than just capping it.
The initial discussion with Doug Mowen is that it just needs to be capped. The only thing I'm doing right now is checking with the public health department to make sure there's no other requirements that they're going to need to disconnect that and to basically take it out of service. But as of right now, it's just having to be capped. So if for some reason something changes to like that, and this is out as far as advertising, we would just have to issue an addendum. So
That could cost quite a bit of money if they put those out of, and they got to fill them and take them right out of operation completely.
correct. And like I said, that's why we're verifying that information. But like I said, right now the thought is that they just need to be capped. And documented that they've been disconnected from the structure.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And to save some time on this, to hopefully get this done this year, like you said, we have the grant until the end of the year. If MacArthur was reluctant to come back and finish the job, would it be possible to put an addendum to this contract so that the contractor that's doing this work would be able to move those curb stops at the time they're installing the water mains?
Not knowing all the details that are being worked out in the negotiations with them, I would say yes, that could be an option.
Okay.
Right. Because again, they're going to be excavating right there at the curb stop anyway to make that connection. They would be right on top of it to make any adjustments there if need be.
Okay. I would hope MacArthur would come back and finish the job they started, but if not, I would hate to see the residents delayed and us delayed, having to put out another request for bid to have another contractor come in and lower all these curb stops, and then another contractor that's gonna hook them up. If we could do it all at once, and if we could amend their contract to include that, of course, there'd be an additional
Right.
fee, I'm sure.
Right.
Okay, just.
So,
All right, thank you.
okay, thank you.
Any other discussion? Is there a motion?
I'll move to approve the advertisement for bid for the water service installation.
Support.
Motion by Mr. Palmer, support by Mr. Cummings. You go ahead.
For the sake of clarity, that is with the dates that are in there, which I am okay with, but that doesn't, I don't want to get on the other side of the roll call here and have some differing opinions on the board as to the dates. So that's with what's listed in the ad.
Yes.
Very good, okay.
All right, roll call.
Mr. Gasky,
Yes.
Ms. McGuire,
Yes.
Mr. Cummings,
Yes.
Mr. Byer,
Yes.
Mr. Nordine, yes, Mr. Palmer,
Yes.
Mr. Weed.
Yes, motion's passed. Next update for the phone system upgrade and recabling of Township Hall.
Right, so after the sewer rate work session, we discussed the details of the phone system upgrade and recabling of Township Hall. And the proposed networking upgrades and phone system replacement provides a long-term solution for multiple deficiencies within the township's IT infrastructure. Your packet contains a map of the affected township buildings for this project, the proposals obtained to complete the work, a detail of the proposed costs, as well as data sheets associated with the proposed equipment. So due to the scoping and quotes not being completely finalized after the township's 2019 appropriations were approved, all costs for this project were not factored into the township's 2019 budget, and this issue will be addressed during the first round of 2019 appropriations adjustments.
Comments?
You made a comment, Tim, about room. How much room do you need if you don't go in the attic? How much room do you need down on the main floor of the township hall?
This would be a full height rack. This would not be something squatty. There would be a fair amount of equipment in this.
10 foot tall?
No, not 10, but you'd be about 6 feet. It's got to fit in the height of that storage area above the police department, which you can stand up in as long as you're between the beams.
I was looking at the room next to the fire chief's, room next to the fire chief's office. That is mainly used as a coffee pot, but they got a coffee pot up front too. I don't
We
know if
looked at
would
that
be,
room.
did you?
I looked at that room, and there wasn't really ventilation in there.
Not
There was
enough.
no way to make it any better than just a closet
Was it
with
there?
no heating and cooling. So one of the problems, you don't want to put it into an oven, but
Right.
admittedly, the storage area above the police department has not been controlled to date. But DPW has stepped up and confirmed that one of the heating cooling ducts that's available right by where the equipment would go, we could stick a vent in that, and we could use that to, at least in that vicinity, control the temperature better than it's ever been in prior years. And even then, the temperatures do not exceed what IT Right is concerned about for the equipment going in. So I think we've pretty well mitigated it.
Also, we're
Yeah, exactly, right.
Any other comments?
I've got one based on the discussion at the work session on Wednesday. We discussed fax machines and their necessity and practical use by the township and costs and everything.
Right.
And we've got 4 of them quoted because you said your intent was to just replace what we had. You didn't go because there was the scope of that was enough in and of itself, which I fully recognize.
And there's a total of 8, 4 in just the township alone. So the total is for 8.
Okay.
'Cause there's 4 others, or 3 or 4 others. There's one at Old Orchard, one at OCC, one at DPW.
One here.
I think that's, yeah, maybe, oh no, here doesn't count.
Okay.
The library is on a separate
they're on,
system.
yeah.
Yep.
Okay. I guess my point would be to limit the number of fax machines as much as we can.
Fine.
While we're doing this, I would.
And we have every opportunity to do that. To be clear about what we're really going to look to achieve tonight in a motion would be to approve funding, but really it doesn't mean that tomorrow at 8 a.m. we start digging or something like that.
Certainly.
There's still a step with legal, our township attorney, to review the master service agreement. There's also another agreement that needs to be reviewed, which they need, one of the vendors needs to provide us, called the irrefutable right of usage, which is for that power injector that needs to go on the back of Township Hall. So yeah, we still have time, and so if we determine in the course of the next few weeks that we've got another fax line we don't need, it's not a...
That's good, because I don't want to yank someone's fax machine that is vital to their job
course.
that I don't know about. I
Neither
don't think
did
there
I.
are any vital fax machines in Township Hall, but that doesn't mean there aren't. So I want to make sure that of that. But yeah, from my experience, what I see day to day, I think we could get rid of quite a few, at least at Township Hall. And the cost associated seems to be that would be a benefit. So.
It's half it would, but it's still half of what we're currently paying
Sure.
today as
Yeah,
well. So
it's certainly a step in the right direction. But compared to a phone line under the quote, I was surprised by the difference. So we could even have better value, hopefully,
Correct.
better savings. So.
Yep, absolutely. So yeah, if we, I think if you want, we can get to a point where we have kind of a resync. Maybe at each of the board meetings we'll talk about it, and if there's any updates. But I think if there's going to be anyone wanting to get rid of anything, phone, fax, whatever, let's take and put it at the top of our list so that by the 28th of this month when we meet again, if there's any changes in it, we know what we're talking about. That's not a problem, and that would be happily reflected in the quote.
Sure.
So, no problem.
Anything else? Is there a motion? I go ahead and make a motion to approve the $46,264.92 associated with the phone system upgrade and the recabling of Township Hall.
Support.
Motion by Mr. Weed, support by Ms. McGuire. Roll call.
Mr. Byer,
Yes.
Mr. Gasky,
Yes.
Ms. McGuire,
Yes.
Mr. Cummings,
Yes.
Mr. Palmer,
Yes.
Mr. Nordine, yes, Mr. Weed.
Yes, motion's passed.
Thank you.
Next, proposals for form-based code.
Right, based on the 2019 budget work sessions with the Township Board, implementing form-based code was incorporated into the 2019 appropriations. During 2018, there was a MAPS training concerning form-based code, and this was also discussed extensively and recommended by the Planning Commission. So this initiative for form-based code is part of the Township's effort to become redevelopment ready certified through the Michigan Economic Development Corporation. Your packet contains a detailed proposal with costs associated with Beckett and Rader for converting the township's B1 Central Business District to form-based code. Your packet also contains a memo from the zoning administrator detailing multiple attempts to obtain quotes for converting the township to form-based code. And in there, you'll see several specific quotes where some of the consulting firms just come out and say you're too far away and travel is going to eat up a large part of the budget associated with this. So Beckett and Rader has done different projects, different initiatives with the township, and the instructor from that MAPS training would also be the consultant working with the planning commission and the township to convert the B1 district to form-based code.
Any comments?
We have a window when this is gonna be completed?
There is a, in there, John puts together a time frame of how far or how long that's gonna take. And in there, he has the number of months. So the scoping is pretty much done. The assessing existing conditions, obviously that's going to require a meeting, visioning and creating
Got it in there
regulations.
for 5 months.
Is it 5 months?
5 months.
5 months, sorry. Thank you.
For one district.
For B1.
How many more do we got?
The option can be that you don't have to do only one district. The planning board chose to start off with one district. If we were doing multiple districts, then there would be an economy of scale,
So we're
cost
only gonna
reduction
do
in
this
here.
one.
What's that?
We're gonna do this one.
Yeah, we're gonna do this one to get things set up, see how it goes, and then
Then
determine
move
from
forward.
there, we can do multiple at one time and have a better, like I said,
Well, that's what I was
economy of
looking
scale
at,
for
More
pricing.
than one at one time. You know.
Ideally, it would be better just, I think, to do the entire township at one time, because all of our ordinances need to get rewritten anyways.
Right.
Yep.
Do you have any input on that from the planning board?
No, I think what you said was appropriate. We had discussed just stepping up and doing the whole thing at one shot. It would be considerably more expensive, but we thought that, let's take on the B1 district. That's kind of what we're focusing on with our strategic planning, and get that done. And then probably our next step will be to do the remainder of the township, I would hope. Form-based code is important to our RRC certification, and this is a positive step forward for the township to bring the zoning up to the 21st century here for bringing in developers. Developers prefer the form-based code. They know because they know what they're getting into, and it would be a positive step for the township for our development.
Bill, what is it that has to happen after we've, let's say, run the cycle on the first, on B1, on the first form-based code update implementation? What then happens before we determine to go with the rest of the township? Is it we have to kind of do, so what actually is the board, or the planning board waiting for? You said, well, I'm looking like, am I looking for like, are there people on the board that just need to kind of see it run and become confident, or is
No, I think it was just determined that, rather than take one giant bite out of this huge apple, let's just take a small bite and get this part done.
Okay.
And then I think everybody will have a better understanding of how this works, what form-based code is. Like Dave mentioned, we had a training session at Warrior Pavilion for form-based code, which the instructor was provided by MAPS, Michigan Association of Planning, and he was actually an employee of Beckett and Rader, and that's who's going to help us put this in place. And I would hope that we'll be able to get him to help us with the remainder of the township when we choose to do that.
And how quickly after the first implementation do you think that decision could be made?
Well, I would hope later this year. If we can get this implemented in 5 months, which is what he's projecting here, that by the end of the year, the Planning Commission will be looking at this, and once it's complete, and taking a look at, how we're going to proceed from here for the remainder of the township.
Mr. Schaefer, redevelopment ready certification and its relation to form-based code, it's a suggestion or a requirement of the process for us?
As you go through, if you are not gonna go with form-based code, then you're gonna have to be able to show that you do have zoning requirements that are up to date and transparent as far as what the rules are and the how those are applied to the different projects. So if you look at the redevelopment ready communities that are certified, I don't know of one that hasn't gone to form-based code, because often these ordinances were written in the 70s or the 80s and maybe have been updated in the 90s or the 2000s. And so we're talking major revamps of these zoning ordinances to be able to, you know, if you're going to invest that type of time and effort, the resources to update your ordinances, looking 5-10 years down the road, most municipalities are going towards the form base.
So that kind of alludes to the answer of my second question. Given your knowledge of our current zoning ordinances and the requirements of RRC, we would be looking at a rewrite. If we said we're not going to do form-based, we have to justify ourselves, we wouldn't be justifiable in our current position. We'd have to rewrite our traditional zoning ordinance, is what I'm getting from you.
Correct.
Okay.
And so during the first training session of RRC down in Lansing, they encourage you to bring your zoning ordinances. Then you get into small groups and kind of trade, all right, and pick a zoning ordinance and try to go through and say, hey, we want to do this development project, what are the rules? And everybody's fumbling through to really try to see what are the rules associated with this. Sure. And you know, that's not how you want your zoning ordinances to be. You want to be just straightforward and transparent.
How did ours compare in that session?
Not favorably.
Okay.
So you're saying everybody was fumbling through?
Correct. Everybody was fumbling through most of them.
So they were all hard to decipher, but you're saying whoever the unlucky participant was that got ours fumbled.
Correct.
More.
As far as trying to be able to understand, hey, we want to put this development in, you know, B2, and what are the just height restrictions? Go to that. And
yeah, but zoning in general is convoluted and confusing by nature, at least. That's my estimation. I'm not asking you to.
The old way was.
And form-based code is more visual than text heavy. Yeah. And so that is favorable for the interpretations and you put out there as far as what the expectations are for site plan review and how to move through that process. The developers want to be able to know what the rules are, and they want to be able to know that if they satisfy those rules, they will get approvals.
And you said you don't know of many or any of municipalities who have adopted the are fully RRC certified, who have not done form-based code. How many do you know of that have made it through the process that are certified now? Are there many
in our region, for Region 3, it's Alpena and Grayling.
Okay.
And that's it.
Other than that,
there are many more that are engaged. I believe we have 24 that are engaged in the process. Yeah. As far as completing the certification, only Alpena and Grayling. Okay. When you get above 10, it's sparse. Okay. And there are some in the UP. Yeah. You have Escanaba and Marquette.
So statewide, there's a handful that are fully RRC certified, or
downstate, more downstate.
Any other comments? Is there a motion?
Yeah, I'll give it. So I move that we approve the $17,530 proposal from Beckett and Rader to implement the form-based code for the Township's B1 district.
Support.
Motion by Mr. Cummings, support by Mr. Gajewski. Roll call.
Ms. McGuire,
Yes.
Mr. Cummings,
Yes.
Mr. Gieske,
Yes.
Mr. Nordine, yes, Mr. Palmer,
Yes.
Mr. Byer,
Yes.
Mr. Weed.
Yes, motion's passed. Resolution ordinances. First is Resolution 2019-1.
All right, so this resolution is an attempt to replace the current system of the contract with Sunny Buns out at Old Orchard Park, and this would also open up the beach and water sports equipment vendors to more locations on township properties.
Any comments? Is there a motion?
I'll move to approve Resolution 2019-1 regarding beach and water sports equipment vendors.
Support.
Motion by Mr. Palmer, support by Mr. Cummings. Roll call?
Mr. Cummings,
Yes.
Ms. McGuire,
Yes.
Mr. Gasky,
Yes.
Mr. Palmer,
Yes.
Mr. Nordine, yes, Mr. Byer,
Yes.
Mr. Weed.
Yes, motion's passed. Next, Resolution 2019-2.
All right, so 2019-2 and 3 are both related to the resolution 2019-01. And so 2019-02 is the establishing fees for the beach, water sport, and vendor application fee. And what that is a fee established to be set for $75.
Comments?
Will there be something set up in the general ledger to place those fees into a different revenue line? Or are we going to put that just under the zoning fees? Or how's that gonna be taken care of?
I would envision
Separate? Or-
that's a.
Have you set up a fund for the food truck fees?
Yeah.
I would think it would go in the
Put 'em all
same,
together.
would go in the same place.
We haven't had a food truck come and apply.
Application,
No,
yeah.
we haven't had any, so that wasn't
So it's
expressly
we haven't crossed that
discussed.
bridge.
Okay.
I think it was,
Instead of zoning permit fee, we could have a zoning application fee. We could
Right.
work within the general
Maybe
ledger to
possibly
establish.
separate that at least then.
Yep.
That'd be great. And let me know what it is so I can set up a cash receipting item.
this is $75 cover the anticipated costs for the zoning administrator to review the applications and
Yes.
should be. I don't remember. How does anyone recall, how does it relate to the food truck? Is it the same, the fee?
I believe it's the same.
Makes sense.
How did we decide on the amount of the application fee? Is there some kind of a formula or consistency with others, or?
I think it's just in line with other fees that it's a cost for processing the application, work that has to go into doing that.
Okay.
And they would do that annually, correct?
Yes.
To be clear, the application fee is the actual permit fee, right?
No,
No, okay, separate, okay.
separate.
So what is
The
the?
application fee is the fee for putting the application,
Fair
and
enough.
then the zoning administrator approving that, going through and approving the application, making sure all the documents are there,
Fair enough.
and all the things that have to go in to make sure that the application is complete.
Got it.
Is there a motion?
I'll make a motion that we approve resolution 2019-2.
Support.
Motion by Ms. McGuire, support by Mr. Cummings.
question. Do we have to do roll call first?
No, go ahead.
Would there be any instance where they would get their money back for the application fee? Or would that just be considered part of the process?
That's
if they
part of the
wanna-
process.
Okay. Just curious. Okay.
All right, roll call.
Ms. McGuire,
Yes.
Mr. Cummings,
Yes.
Mr. Byer,
Yes.
Mr. Nordine, yes, Mr. Gasky,
Yeah.
Mr. Palmer,
Yes.
Mr. Weed.
Yes, motion's passed. Next, resolution 2019-3.
Right, so 2019-3 also builds from Resolution 2019-1 and 2, and this is the daily or 30-day or 120-day fee detailed for the beach and water sports vendor license fee.
Comments?
Yeah, I have a question. Why does the bullet list of options from daily, 30-day, 120-day not include a longer period that would constitute a season?
Well, basically 120 days is a season for water sports.
So you wouldn't go in earlier, wouldn't go in later? Because I know that Old Orchard is open earlier and
Well, they
stays
would
open
have the
later.
option if they wanted to extend a few days or 30 days, you could buy the additional fee where it says whereas, it does have a fee for an entire a year.
An entire year.
So the maximum
Oh, I
annual
see.
fee.
I got it. So you could get, I see what you're saying. It's funny. It was just I didn't read it that way, but I see what you're saying now. Okay.
Did this resolution have insurance requirements in it?
Yes.
It did in number one.
Oh, it did in number one?
In number one had it, yeah.
I didn't miss that.
And I would just for information of the board, I originally wrote this as an addition to our ordinance 165, but in discussions with our attorney, because I reviewed this with him several times, he's the one that suggested that we do it as a resolution.
Right.
For a couple different reasons. Number one, the resolution process is much simpler to put in place than a zoning ordinance change. And the other thing is, he was pretty excited about this. He made some suggestions of things that we might want to incorporate down the road that they have in other communities, like bike rentals. There are areas in other parts of the state where they have these huge racks, and you can use a credit card and swipe it and take a bike out, take it wherever you want, and you don't necessarily have to return it there. You can leave it somewhere else, and whoever runs that operation, they pick them up and return them. With the coming of the bike path, that certainly might be something that we would want to, that some vendor might have an interest in doing. So that's why it's in this format as opposed to a zoning change. And like I said, the attorney was kind of excited. He had several ideas of things that we might want to include in the future. And with this, it certainly can be changed as the time goes on.
That's good.
I have a question. Pick on Sunny Buns, for example. So they have an operation out at Old Orchard. At the present time, do we get a percentage of their earnings?
20% of gross sales.
Is that going to continue?
No.
No.
This would replace that mechanism.
This would replace that.
And this would also open it up to other township-owned properties, not just exclusively there at Old Orchard.
All right. So we're not going to hit them twice.
Nope. I kind of like this approach for reasons that it doesn't put us having to audit any vendor.
Yeah.
You just buy your permit, we're done. The only person who gets to audit you now is the IRS or the state or whatever. But So I like that, and I feel like we're not keep putting our hands into people's pockets and doing that. I feel like this is a better approach. And to your point, Jim, Dave, so 5,000 compared to what we might have been getting for the 20% that we were getting before, this is less than the 20%, correct?
It is a little bit less, but it also can be consistent because that vendor is going to know their fixed cost.
Yep.
And we're going to know what to anticipate to get.
Yep.
Whereas, you know, if it continues to rain on all the weekends in July and August, that vendor is not going to have as much of a successful venture.
That's right.
So this insulates the vendor and hopefully opens up more opportunities for other vendors to understand their fixed costs if
That's
they're
right.
planning a business.
I like that.
Is there a motion?
I'll make the motion, we adopt resolution number 2019-03.
Support.
Motion by Mr. Gieske, support by Mr. Cummings. Roll call? Unless you had something?
I know.
Okay.
Thank you, though. I was thinking about it. Mr. Byer,
Yes.
Mr. Cummings,
Yes.
Mr. Nordine, yes. Mr. Palmer,
Yes.
Mr. Gasky,
Yes.
Ms. McGuire,
Yes.
Mr. Weed.
Yes, motion's passed. Resolution 2019-4.
All right, so this is good news for the police department. We have gone through the process of promotions and new hires and new assignments. So this is the resolution that would identify Patrol Sergeant Eric McNichol to be promoted to the position of Detective Sergeant, Police Officer Kevin Kubik to be promoted to the position of Patrol Sergeant, Police Officer Gerald Soboleski to be assigned to the position of Community Service / Code Compliance Officer, and Sheila Palmer to be extended a conditional offer to be hired as police officer upon the successful completion of employment screening. So this will conclude all of the promotional and hiring activities within the police department based on the millage passed in August.
Comments?
And just for clarification, there's no relation between myself and Ms. Palmer.
And Sheila Palmer. All right. Good to know. Well, I say well done to you and the police chief and those in the police department who have been involved in the testing and the recruiting and the hiring process. I'm glad that we're here.
Thank you.
And speaking with Chief David, it's, I think as everybody knows, it's become more and more difficult to hire police officers everywhere. I mean, not just here. He told me that he'd gone 10 years ago and put out this request for officers who probably had 100 applications. This time he received 4. Was lucky to get that many. So it's a real problem recruiting police officers around the country, actually. So I think we're pretty fortunate here.
I think we're very fortunate to have the police department we have.
Yes, yes.
Is there a motion?
I'll move to approve Resolution 2019-4.
Support.
Motion by Mr. Palmer, support by Mr. Byer. Roll call.
Mr. Gasky,
Yes.
Ms. McGuire,
Yes.
Mr. Byer,
Yes.
Mr. Nordine, yes. Mr. Palmer,
Yes.
Mr. Cummings,
Yes.
Mr. Weed.
Yes, motion's passed. Under other, we have potential township board work sessions.
All right, so the row engineering has been working to be able to submit draft versions of the sanitary sewer ordinance, as well as revisions to the water ordinance. And we were hoping to be able to establish a Wednesday afternoon in February here at the library to go over both of those ordinances in detail. And the plan would be that Mr. Freeman submit those, and I'll distribute to the township board, and we can review those prior to the discussion on the 20th. But both of those have been going through extensive revisions over the last couple months. So we are very hopeful to be able to roll those new ordinances out.
You get to see what it looks like from this side of the table. All right. The only thing I have regarding this is that 2 o'clock seems to be cutting it too close to another event that happens on Wednesdays. Whatever day we choose, if we can bump it up to 1:30 or 1 o'clock, I think that would be a little better.
I agree. I was going to make the same comment or observation. Yeah.
I think we're flexible here. So if we want to do 1 o'clock instead of 2 o'clock, we can make that happen.
I will not be available that week or the following week. I'll be out of town.
Which weeks are we looking at again?
It's Wednesday, the 20th of February.
Okay.
So we'll try to get you those in advance so you can,
Okay.
any, questions or comments, you can still filter to us.
Okay, sure.
I also won't be back till the 21st. I'll be leaving the 12th, I won't be back till the 21st.
All right, well, then we're down to 5.
5. We have others that'll be gone too? 7, 6, 5. Okay, sorry. Had to do a little math.
Would Wednesday, the 27th, the following Wednesday, would that be better? Bill, you're still out that following week?
Yes.
And Martin, okay.
I'll be back.
Yeah, that one, we've got a BSNA coming to implement the time clock program that day too, so I would probably be tied to Township Hall that day.
Which day?
The 27th.
I don't know if
Would it be possible to move it up a week to the 13th? I will still be here on the 13th.
You won't be though.
I know Martin won't be. I mean, we could do the 6th of March.
No, audit week.
Yeah,
Sorry.
27th though, I
Okay.
could probably be here. Shelley can handle whatever we got going on.
Okay.
I only want to ask, is it possible that we make it, instead of 1 o'clock, we make it 1:30?
Okay.
I have to end off a meeting, and I need to be able to get physically here.
Right, so the 27th at 1:30.
Is that okay with everybody?
Yep.
All right, I make a motion that we have the Township Board work session on Wednesday, February 27th at 1:30 PM here at the library.
Support.
Motion by Mr. Weed, support by Ms. McGuire. Roll call?
Mr. Palmer,
Yes.
Mr. Byer,
Yes.
Ms. McGuire,
Yes.
Mr. Cummings,
Yes.
Mr. Gajewski,
Yes.
Mr. Nordine, yes, Mr. Weed.
Yes, motion's passed. All right, next, revisions to the Township Sewer Ordinance and Water Ordinance.
Part of the,
Yeah.
that's part of the first one.
Okay. So then, on to number 3, DDA resignations.
All right, so in your packet, you have resignation letters for 3 DDA members. Jolene Sen and Pat Shiflett and Joe Maxwell.
Any comments?
It's apparent that the three letters I'm looking at, all three people enjoyed the job, but do not appreciate the treatment they've gotten from this board. They expressed it in various different ways. Mrs. Sen, I have struggled with the lack of support, collaboration, and respect the DDA has received in the past 10 months. Pat Shiflett, in addition, frankly, unprofessional and disrespectful actions by a few township board members have influenced my decision, or there is a cause of it. And Joe Maxwell tends to kind of get us all here. However, with the current apparent lack of cooperation and what seems to be false accusations voiced by members, doesn't say a few members, it's just members of the township board, it is impossible for me to continue. So you can read these, but these are quality people. I really hate to see them go. And we've had, one or two resignations prior to this, and it grieves me deeply that we're losing these people. They're not leaving because they're tired. They're leaving because they don't think they're appreciated, and so.
Any other comments? All right, I make a motion, we accept the resignation from the DDA from Joe Maxwell.
I'll support with regret.
Motion from Mr. Weed, support by Ms. McGuire. Roll call.
Mr. Nordine, yes. Mr. Palmer,
Yes.
Ms. McGuire,
Yes.
Mr. Byer,
No.
Mr. Cummings,
Yes.
Mr. Gieske,
Yes.
Mr. Weed,
Yes, motion's passed. I make a motion, we accept the DDA resignation of Jolene Sen.
Support.
Motion by Mr. Weed, support by Mr. Gieske. Roll call.
Mr. Gieske,
Yes.
Ms. McGuire,
Yes.
Mr. Cummings,
Yes.
Mr. Byer,
No.
Mr. Nordine, yes. Mr. Palmer,
Yes.
Mr. Weed,
Yes, motion's passed. Make the motion, we accept the resignation of Patricia Shiflett.
Support. With regrets.
Motion by Mr. Weed, support by Mr. Palmer. Roll call.
Mr. Byer,
No.
Mr. Gieske,
Yes.
Ms. McGuire,
Yes.
Mr. Cummings,
Yes.
Mr. Palmer,
Yes.
Mr. Nordine, yes. Mr. Weed,
Yes, motion's passed.
As in the past, they'll get sent a letter thanking them for their service, correct?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Next, utility billing clerk resignation.
Right. So this was received on December 12th, and it was the utility billing clerk, Robin, to be able to resign her position as utility billing clerk effective December 26th.
Any comments? Is there a motion?
I move we accept this letter of resignation from Mrs. Brown
Support.
with regrets.
Thank you. With support.
Motion by Mr. Byer, support by Mr. Cummings. Roll call.
Ms. McGuire,
Yes.
Mr. Cummings,
Yes.
Mr. Gajewski.
Yes.
Mr. Nordine, yes. Mr. Palmer.
Yes.
Mr. Byer.
Yes.
Mr. Weed.
Yes, motion's passed. Next, there's a DDA appointment from Rosemary Netwig, who is a former member of the DDA. Are there any comments?
This is her letter of interest, but you're going to appoint her, is that correct?
Correct.
Okay.
I make a motion that we approve Rosemary Netwick to be a member on the DDA board with a term. No, I just lost what the date was for that. Let me pull it out. Term expiring 31 March of 2021.
So you
I'm
need a
sorry.
second?
Yeah, was
Yes.
that I was gonna say, was there, that was the motion?
Yes.
Okay, good, support.
Motion by Mr. Weed, support by Mr. Cummings. Roll call?
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
Just for record keeping, is she taking a specific seat or?
Jolene sends
Okay,
seat.
all right, thank you.
Really just that date, the
Yeah,
expiration date.
yeah, your date does it. It's easier for me to ask, so thank you. All right, Mr. Cummings,
Yes.
Ms. McGuire,
Yes.
Mr. Gajewski,
Yes.
Mr. Palmer,
Yes.
Mr. Nordine, yes. Mr. Byer,
Yes.
Mr. Weed.
Yes, motion's passed. All right, we're now on to our second public comment period. There's still a 4-minute time limit, and no card needs to be filled out. Anyone may speak. When you come to the podium, please introduce yourself. Does anyone wish to speak?
Greg Cole, 4507 Manette Dam Road. I have some comments about MacArthur excavating, being I live right down there. When the project first started, I get a knock at the door, and they say, we got 1 hour to get our cars off the road. There's only one way to get down to our homes down there. There's 14 residents. And we were able to find a path through the woods to get out to 41. Now, some of our neighbors had to walk all the way up to 41. And I thought as you go forward with phase 2, there's going to be some things that you can learn from phase 1 here. One of the things I thought about, if we would have needed an ambulance down there, we have a couple neighbors down there that are in poor health. There would have been no way that an ambulance could have got down there. So some of the other things, I had my mailbox taken out. I think there was a couple mailboxes that were taken out. Some wires that were taken out.
Can you clarify taken out? Can you clarify what you mean by taken out?
Our mailbox was destroyed. And I believe there was one other neighbor. And then there was some wires, some cable wires that were, I don't think they were doing anything. I think they were old phone lines, but they were just left out in the road. I gathered them up, rolled them up, got them off the road. So, and then one of the things too, I don't know if you were aware, the foreman of the project, he left for 3 weeks, went to Alaska. The guy that drove the heavy equipment and was in charge of the crew. So I don't know if when he was gone, if some of these mistakes that was made could have been because he was gone in the middle of the project. And one of the other things that happened, Spicer's Engineering, the gentleman that was down there, John was his name. I got to know him a little bit, and he was showing me a chart of everyone that was getting, water tap-ins from over on Forest Drive all the way down Benetton Dam Road. And my property and my neighbor's property wasn't even on it. And he looked at it and he says, well, I don't have you on here. And I have 2 wells that have to get addressed. And my neighbor, John, up above me, he wasn't on it. So I thought that was, peculiar on the way they operate, with Spicers and MacArthur. I have, let's see. And of course we had the drain up front that you know about that they didn't put in properly that comes across underneath. Yeah, that's about it. But I want to say that the township was down there overlooking, and so I don't have a problem with that. I just have a problem with this MacArthur excavating company. So I just wanted to let you know when you go forward into phase 2, you might want to watch out for some of these things that happened to us.
Did Spicer have an inspector on scene? Do you have any comment about that?
What I heard was Aaron came down for a final inspection, and that's when I talked to Aaron that I think the water company, what's that, FNS? Or
F&B.
F&B,
yeah.
they came down, and that's when they found out that the one fire hydrant was way out in the road, and the curb hookups were off. So, but overall, I thought that MacArthur wasn't, what they should have been. I really do.
Okay.
So, thanks.
Thank you.
Anybody else wish to speak? All right. Well, now we're on to board comments. Does board members have anything? Okay.
Well, just one comment on the information on the first responders. I'm saddened to see here that they're going to be permanently closed October 1st of this year. That's troubling to me that we're losing the responders that actually responded in a timely manner. The county service, that was totally unpredictable when they would show up for a call, whereas our responders, they have an average response time of 8 minutes. So it saddens me to see that they're going by the wayside here. It's just.
On that note, I have 911 aggregating data over 2018 for ambulance response times, so that we can schedule a meeting with the county to discuss their what I perceive as being extremely long response times. And there'll probably be a few other township representatives from other townships there at that meeting also. It's definitely a concern countywide.
Just a clarification of what you're saying, the aggregation is, of course, just at the county level, not to include Oscoda, correct? Because the response time you're looking for is the county level.
We will be discussing ambulance response times,
At the county level?
not first
Not
responder
EMS.
first time.
Okay, fair enough.
Yeah.
Okay, good. Good. Fair enough.
Yeah, because we're paying a millage for ambulance service.
Yes, we are.
Therefore, we should be getting it.
Mm-hmm.
All right, any other comments? Do I need a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
We are adjourned. Thanks for coming out.